everybody, it's Survey Program, Kate here. Thanks for everybody's support at groupashrike.net, where you can subscribe to Green Room and get access to bonus episodes. Thanks for listening, everybody. Music's by Highwell. Well, welcome to Survey Program. I've got Samuel Lipson on. And we are doing an episode on the politics of hometown on this one. And we're going to get into a little bit of why and sort of our shared background in politics, I'm sure, soon. But first, as with all first-time guests on the podcast, I want to ask, how'd you get into Undertale and Deltarune?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Sam Lipson. I'm an analyst by trade and a political activist in the background, and I spend way too much time playing video games besides that. I wouldn't explicitly call myself, like, super into the Undertale Deltarune fandom. It's just not, I have so little free time these days, but as far as, like, getting into it, I honestly couldn't tell you what got me back into Undertale back in 2015. I mean, that was 11 years ago, but I think, honestly, if I had to nail one thing down, maybe it was when Jacksepticeye played Undertale, and I decided that I had to play it for myself, and I was like, yeah, wow, this is a really good game. And then I played it, and it was a really good game. And then I saw Deltarune came out, and I played it, and Deltarune was a really good game. And so I think you can see what I'm getting at here.
Yeah.
So
you've been at day one on Deltarune.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, 100%. And I'm always very excited to see when there's new news of a chapter. But I also wouldn't consider myself somebody who's, like, going around in the lore or, like, the fan. Like, I'm not somebody participating in Deltarune. Other than knowing what Deltarune is, I don't participate in it.
We try to steer away from that completely on the pod. You know, we try to lean more into the literary analysis and, like, the cultural phenomenon of Deltarune. So, although it's hard to resist sometimes getting into the weeds on the theory shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you've been you've been keeping up with the chapter releases. Another question I like to ask folks that have been coming on since the last week of June: how'd you like Chapter 5?
I mean, it was fantastic. It's not Chapter 4. I'm not going to pretend like it is, but I really quite enjoyed it. I can't bring myself to play Weird Route on my own computer, so I have to watch Weird Route from other sources. But I am very interested to see where everything with that all goes. I think you and I talked about, in particular, seeing the scene at the what is it called? The festival, when you talk to Sans and he makes you take a picture. And it's the three people smiling, yada yada, everybody, don't forget, go ahead and you know, you fan out and you're like, oh shit, it's the thing, guys, it's the thing.
That was a fucking nuke. No, was if you've been around since Undertale, that was a nuclear bomb that went off.
Yeah, but ultimately, like, my thing is, no, I think that they did a really good job with Chapter 5. I, in particular, was really pleased to see Ralsei as a character grow a spine, and I'm also, this is maybe me wanting to imagine it, but also Chris getting more comfortable with the soul, realizing, assuming you're not playing Weird Route, realizing, oh wait, this thing doesn't wanna, they can't stand the soul, but, like, it's not, you know, I mean, I'm trying to help you, big dog, like, you gotta let me, you gotta work with me, but, you know, I'm very curious to see where it all goes.
I feel like that's one of the things that I've really loved about sort of since Chapter 3, you're getting this increasing sense of who Chris is as a person. And, like, it's, you know, and also that increasing, like, obviously Chris is torn between whatever their plan is and the fact that they're having fun, right? They're having fun with Susie and Ralsei. And, you know, it's both heartwarming and a little scary and tragic to think about them being pulled in those two different directions.
Yeah.
And, you know, but the fact that the you know, this was like this was sort of pitched by Toby and the newsletters as like the last sort of fun adventure is very ominous, right? Like this is the last time we get like a charismatic, main boss who's funny and will win a Tumblr Sexy Man contest.
Yep.
It's like giving a dog chocolate before putting them down. That angle of the marketing is very alarming, and I do feel like, obviously you mentioned chapter 4 being your favorite. I think it's also my favorite. And that sort of raised the emotional stakes of the game, and so it does give this. It gives the fun romp that we were all having in chapter 5 this sort of like melancholy aura to it, right? Like there's this sad
it felt
edge.
very chapter 5 felt very wrong. It felt very tonally dissonant. I felt like it didn't belong where it was in the story of things, and you could argue that that's the point, right? Because ultimately, like, I think for me, right, you have all of these really interesting beats with like in chapter 4 with like Susie understanding that she's more than this one character through Gerson and the soul helping Ralsei understand, and like, no, you can be a person too. Like I obviously, like, my long-term stance has been that the dark world is not just toys. It's not just these like dark reflections that are essentially unreality. There's something there, and I think the whole point is, I don't exactly think it's like merge two worlds or any of that kind of like cockamamie, but like it's this idea of like that, I don't know, something about like there being finding the little things there. I don't know. I think I can't shake the feeling that there's something real about the dark worlds, and I'm very curious to see where that goes in chapter 6 and 7, then and 7B, I guess, if that's a thing.
Good God, yeah. And I mean, I think you're hitting at something very real there, where there's this idea of like, because from our perspective, right, from our vantage point, sitting above the, in the layer of reality above the game, the characters in the light world and the dark world are equally real, right? They're both fictional from our perspective, right? And so I don't think, as some maybe more cynical people do, that like the message of the game is that like the message of the game is not escapism is bad, right? Or that like fiction is bad.
Absolutely not.
And I think I definitely am with you that it feels much more like the point is to be able to take something and grow and change as a person from your engagement with fictional worlds and your engagement with stories. And I think it's a very lovely message.
Yeah, and I think you end up making that fictional world real in some way by engaging with it. Perhaps in the case of Deltarune, quite literally. Which is why I actually don't view the ending of Chapter 5 as sad and depressing as a lot of people seem to view it. Like they think that this idea of like, oh, like Susie's gonna go hide in the closet in the school and that's her home now, and I'm like, I don't really see it that way. I always saw it as like, yeah, obviously it's sad that she doesn't have a place she belongs in. She's most likely got either neglectful or either abusive parents, or maybe they're not even present in their life. But like, she's found somewhere she's belonged, even if that's a make-believe world. And I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with that. I think maybe there would be something wrong with it if it was a little bit more clear that the dark worlds were truly like make-believe and they're not real. But I don't know that that's the angle that the story is going for, that they are fake, that they are escapism, or to your point, if they are escapism, that's necessarily a problem. I don't know.
I think it would be a problem if it started to like, but this is the thing, is it's like, it's not like she doesn't care about the light world or about her friends, about the town and about protecting people, right? It's like, it could be. I think some people have taken it slightly ominously, right? Because it could be an indicator that she's getting a little lost in the sauce, right? But we haven't seen that happen yet, right? That's a purely predictive idea, and really, that's the thing, is you think, oh, it's sad that she's sleeping in the supply closet in the school, even if it's a magical world in there, right? But, well, no, it's sadder that she was like sleeping in an alley or on a bench, right? Like it's actually, this is a step up. It's not like she's abandoning a loving home to go to the dark world. Like, Susie she's been given meaning in life by having this story, this quest, this this adventure happen to her, and she's not abandoning caring about. She cares about people more than ever before. She cares about real life and protecting the town more than she ever would have before.
Yeah, and I think one of the and that's the thing that makes it. It's like the fake the again I hesitate to say the word fake, but the dark worlds make her more cognizant of what matters in reality. It's like, Noelle matters, Chris matters. There's all of these people that the night is kidnapping matter, and something's happening to them. And I think of it a lot like there's this like, I hesitate to bring up Sword Art Online because there's about 1 million problems with Sword Art Online that I'm not going to get into here. But one of the things that always stood out to me in the abridged version, and that they lampshade in the abridged version, is that during the worst arc, the fairy dance arc, where Asuna is literally just in a cage being, sexualized to no end, and one of the things that they say in the abridged version is like, why did you do this in the one place where I have a foothold? And I think that's kind of a similar thing that's going on here, is that Susie is being given a chance to. Susie has no standing, no abilities, no anything in hometown, and I think and so she's finally got this place where she can engage with things that matter and affect things that matter her. And so it kind of begs the question, if, for example, if the knight is a Lightner, if they are a person, why do they keep going into the dark world to do things? And why do they keep letting Susie? Because I think it's quite clear, for example, that Susie is not the girl in the prophecy. I know that's a hot take. I know that's the coldest take of all time, but I think it's quite clear that Noelle is supposed to be the girl, and that the intervention of the soul made Susie the girl. And I also think, importantly, that Ralsei does not recognize this, despite that he has knowledge of the prophecy. So I think that's going to be something that I don't know if it's going to be dealt with in chapter 6, but I think that that's very clear, and I'm very interested to see where that goes. And I'm also interested to see where the relationship between Chris and the Soul goes, and in particular the relationship between the Soul and Ralsei goes, because I think Ralsei is very much aware of the Soul from some of the dialogues in chapter 5.
I would say even going back to chapter 1, right, where you close your eye, Chris closes their eyes and thinks about what Susie's doing, and when you come back, Ralsei's talking to Chris about something, like wrapping up a conversation with Chris, right?
Yeah, I think I remember seeing something on Twitter of them turning that into like a comic or whatever.
Yeah.
Ever. But ultimately, and like that's the thing. I think I'm trying to think about how to express this, but like basically what I want to be able to do as the character lording over the game is kind of something similar to One Shot, right? Where I'd like to think that I'm here to avert any kind of bad ending. I'm here to prevent that. I'm here to prevent what the knight wants to do, which is seemingly to like forcibly encroach the dark worlds on the light worlds and make everything miserable. But I'm also here to prevent the implication being that like the dark worlds have to be toys that you have to set aside and grow up with someday. And like I said, I think we had this conversation privately, but when Susie, who is what I would consider to be the variable, along with the soul, obviously, but I think Susie is honestly even more, you could argue, is even more of a variable, is like when Gerson asks her, what do you want to do when faced with reality, and what do you want to do with the concept of the story ending? And she's just like, why should it end? And I think it's good to ask that question. I think it's healthy to ask that question. Why should you have to give up your inner child? Why should you have to give up all of these rich worlds? And I think that's what's being built to, in at least the good ending, whatever that ends up being. I think at some point Toby said that there's only one ending to this story. I think he's lying through his fucking teeth. So we'll see if I'm wrong there.
And that's the fundamental question is what on earth does that mean?
Yeah.
Because we've had so many different, it feels like there's so many different ways the story can go. And so, from my perspective, I'm like, I feel like the ending means that it's going to end, right? The one ending is that we stop playing the game and the game ends. And I don't know how, and I think how we get there really does matter. I do want to...
Perhaps that's what he means. I could also take it. I could also take it as there is only supposed to be one ending. The prophecy is supposed to occur. It is supposed to play out as is whatever the predetermined path that involved Noelle being the girl, because let's be honest, it was supposed to be her, like that plays out, and perhaps Toby is trying to lampshade this idea of like, you are here to make Deltarune the game not end in one way. That is what you are here to do. Yeah. What that ultimately ends up looking like could change depending mainly on whether you do the weird route or not. But you are here to change things. And that also just seems in line with, in my opinion, that seems in line with what the disembodied voice that is almost certainly Gaster wants to do. He wants to introduce variables. He wants to see if things will change. Not necessarily, I don't necessarily view him as change in ways that are good or bad, but he has this predetermined story in front of him, and he wants to see if there's anything that can be done about it, because that would be interesting. What I do wonder, though, and then I'll leave it at this, is that I do wonder what the second disembodied voice is from the very beginning of the game, that rejects the vessel. That is the only thing that I feel like I don't have any kind of indication as to what or who that is, because I think that's something distinct, and that's something that, like, I could talk for hours about this world and the characters in it, but like, there's nothing there for me right now, and I'd really like to see that be touched on as soon as possible, frankly.
Yeah, and we are, but of course, we are here to talk about the light world, right? The quote-unquote real world. And I think it's very interesting because, you know, there is a world of like jobs and adults and you know, and cars and businesses in this world, right? The world of the mundane. But, you know, we're experiencing it through the eyes of teenagers, right? Through high schoolers. And, you know, when you're that age, you're very disconnected. You know, you're completely removed from the levers of power, right? And so,
yes,
and that's part of what, you know, it makes it feel like a whole different stories, because although our characters are growing increasingly powerful in the dark world, they're still powerless in the light world, right? And so
they're kids, yeah,
exactly, and you know that makes them, you know, that's part of what makes Carol so imposing too as a character, is that, you know, she has all the temporal power, right? Like she's, you know, she has, you know, she's chilling because it feels like she has an iron grip on hometown, as, you know, as Alpha says, you know, there's not even any, there's not any crime because the mayor has it all under control, right? You know, as Politics Bear says, she runs unopposed despite having no charisma. Yeah. And so we've got some questions from the listeners, and just some thoughts about, you know, the world of hometown and also like what the game's trying to say with small town. But at first, I feel like I want to give a little bit of background as to why I'm interested in this topic and why I've brought you on, which is that I have a I have a personal history as a professional political campaign manager. Prior to doing what I've done, you know, prior to 2016, I grew up, I studied political campaigning. I worked for Obama 2012. I managed a couple county level political campaigns. And I mostly worked in field when I wasn't campaign managing. And so I have a lot of history with this, you know, local level municipal government stuff. And so it's always fascinated me, the regional differences in small towns. And I know that you, of course, we met because you also have a political background. So you want to give a little context on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's see, I'm trying to think about what the best way to explain this is. So, if you've ever been involved with politics on the internet, which is always it's a precarious thing to choose to get involved in, is that can often be, if you decide to venture outside of Twitter or Blue Sky, that can get really decentralized really quickly. And the place that I've chosen to make my home is the Substack chat of a political journalist named Ettingermentum, or Josh Cohen. Owen is his real name. Josh and I have been friends for about 2 years now. really just by pure chance. I was like, hey, Josh, would you like me to record the articles for you, do voiceover work for the articles for you? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I've been doing that since the 2024 election season until now. Definitely recommend checking him out at Ettingermentum.news. Also coming in and talking to me and Kate in that subject chat, which is the most
so we're both
one
members
on Substack
of a totally demented Substack chat called for this guy's Substack articles, and it is, I can't even begin to describe what goes. It's basically like, if you're familiar with Delta-Rot, right, as I'm sure you are, if you were wondering what the American political equivalent of Delta-Rot is, it's that chat room. Like, it's
very much the case, but it's also full of people who are, I think the thing that I like about it the most is it's honestly, at least as far as I've seen, one of the last outposts of electoral leftism on the internet. Because, like, don't get me wrong, because most electoral leftists are, to be frank, going and doing electoralism. They are on the ground and being involved in politics, which I am as well. My main area is phone banking because I live in Florida. Not a whole lot for me to do here, so I do phone banking for camping.
I used to do field in Florida, and I mean, let me tell you, like, summer campuses in Florida are just like the worst thing imaginable. I mean, first off, Florida's overall so sprawly that you're like walking through suburban, subdivisions, and it's like 100 degrees outside. It's so terrible.
Yep, it's tough. It's tough, but I have a background in leading phone banks for, God forbid, the Graham Platner campaign before that imploded. Graham Platner, if you're not aware, was a progressive dirtbag leftist. I use that term affectionately. A dirtbag leftist campaigner for the main Senate race until it was outed that he was a sexual abuser. And everybody left his campaign pretty much immediately, myself included. And then I went over to the Abdul El-Sayed campaign, who was campaigning for the Senate primary in Michigan for this year.
Congratulations, by the way.
That was a brutal night to watch. Yeah. It was. I think for those who weren't following, the polls had him up regularly by anywhere from 10 to 17, and he ended up. Let me actually go check right now. New York Times, Michigan Senate. Let's look at the live results. No, it was way worse than that. What do you mean create a free account because I'm in private browsing? It is, of course it is. We're gonna just do this really quickly. Tell you what, I'll do this and I'll do that. We're not gonna take up too much time here. I'm just gonna copy this and do that. Perfect. Yeah, he ended up winning by 1%, about doing some napkin math in my head, about 14,000 votes. And so just as a political activist myself, you could look at that and you could be like, wow, it was really, really close. And, that was really, really scary. But the way that I choose to look at it and the way that I recommend people when they involve with themselves to look like that is like, that is proof of just how much the ground game matters. So there were over 1.5 million votes in that primary, and it came down, and the winner won by less than 20,000 votes.
Yeah.
Like, that is the power of ground game. Also, interestingly, because that's an open primary state and the Republican was running uncontested, instead, there is some decent evidence that a decent amount of a not insignificant amount of Republicans voted in the Democratic Senate primary for the centrist candidate, specifically to make their chances better. I don't know how many people that is. I think it's an amount. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was maybe, I don't know, 50,000 people statewide, which is like, again, that's only like, what, that's like 50,000 people would be like 3% of that race. So it's close, but like the bigger issue with that race was that it just overestimated independent participation and a bunch of other stuff. But polling primaries is hard. Double-digit polling misses in primaries is not uncommon.
The campaign I was running in 2014, we did a poll. We actually we scrounged together some money we were trying to determine, how much should we be focusing on this primary? How much should we be looking ahead to the general? We got PPP to do a poll. We were up by 25. This was a couple months before election day. We thought, okay, cool, great. We don't really need to care. We don't need to, we don't need to take this primary. If we try to take this too seriously, we're going to elevate our opponent, right? We're going to boost his name rec. Election night for the primary comes by, we squeak by like 3 points. And I swear to God, it was the most stressful night of my life. It was terrible.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, and that's what happens, right? That's what happens with these races that are so brutal. But there's going to be a lot of stuff about how pollers are like terrible and like they shouldn't be trusted in the wake of this result. And I think that that's not really true at all in the wake of the two things that I said, which is that there could have been conservative crossover in this race in a not insignificant amount, and on top of that, double-digit polling misses are just like to give you an idea, a 3-point miss on polls across the board for, say, the presidential level would be way much more concerning than like a 10-point miss in primaries. It's hard to pull primaries. It just is because you're working at a smaller scale and you have to make more assumptions about what the composition of the electorate will look like, and then on top of all of that, you're not being smoothed out by law of large numbers stuff as much in these smaller races. You've got I don't know what the turnout was in the 2024 presidential, but it easily broke, I'm sure it broke 100 million people at least, and you're dealing with a fraction of that, a tiny fraction of that here in this stuff, 2024 presidential. I'm going to look that up really quickly to give you context. So 1.5 million in this primary and over 150 million people in the 2024 presidential. So literally 1% of that. So you can see how just the polling is, Anyway, that's enough about real world politics. How about we turn back to some fake world politics?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I think that people are coming in with their own assumptions about hometown, often bringing their own experiences in American suburbs and small towns to the game, right? Without understanding the geographic context of hometown. You're reading a little bit into it. You're basing it off a map sprite on the weather report on the TV and the way some of the dialect choices that people make, and also the fact that the developers from New England, right? The developers from the region. But the hometown pretty clearly is a New England small town. It's not a suburb. It's not an exurb. It's one of those old growth, small cities where, that has an old urban core. The houses are all pretty close to one another. And this is a very different environment than the typical American small town, right? We associate American small towns and suburbs, I think most people, especially those of us from the South, like you and I, associate that with a sort of entrenched conservatism, or, even, just a really repressive environment. Whereas, New England small towns are nuclear level, Democrat strongholds.
Absolutely.
Whenever somebody, whenever a trad online posts an aerial photo of a beautiful small town in autumn with a big old church in the middle and is this is the America that I'm fighting to protect. It's almost always a Vermont or New Hampshire town that went D+80 in 2024.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's what hometown is, and it's similar to the way that the church in the game is very clearly a New England mainline Protestant church. That again, people bring their assumptions of what church means, right? They're used to their to the sort of religious movements in America outside of New England and outside of mainline Protestantism. So they think, oh, it must be regressive, it must be conservative, it must be a symbol of power, of empire. And it's the church in hometown is very clearly an accepting place. Alvin is a kind and inclusive person who is very encouraging to Susie, and obviously Gerson, being the former pastor there, is even more important to Susie and very welcoming of the outcasts. And so I think it's really important to understand that unique nature of the New England small town when you're thinking about hometown, right? It's not so bad of a place. Now, hometown obviously feels restrictive, and our young characters feel trapped there because there's not much of a future there for the young, right? And that's true of small towns all over America, even in these like nicer places, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's interesting that, you know, but it's not so politically coded like people think. And I do think it's interesting that, you know, you do find that in the Dark Worlds, right? Many of the Dark Worlds do feel like a commentary on power and power structures. You know, there's the joke in chapter 2 about like an evil ruler is taking over this world, but I don't care about politics, so I'm not going to do anything about it.
Yep.
And, you know, the rulers of the first 3 Dark Worlds are very much these, like, you know, people who are, you know, oppressive and need to be overthrown, right? Either by subjects of kingdoms in chapter 1 and 2, or, you know, the employees who are being exploited in chapter 3. And, you know, that sense of, as we were talking about earlier, that sense of power that our heroes have in the Dark World, you know, they don't have to confront Carol in the Light World. And so it's you know, it's interesting that Carol seems to have consolidated a great deal of power. And that brings us to our first listener question from Sophie Foley. How much political authority, official and unofficial, could someone like Carol feasibly hold in a town like Hometown IRL? And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this.
Well, I mean, it kind of depends, right? It depends a lot about, like, it depends a lot with, like, state-level relationships and stuff like that. So something that stands out to me, I don't think that Hometown is at all based on where I grew up and got involved in politics in Arkansas. But historically in Arkansas, it was really weird, like, the relationship between local and state government in a way where, like, or like different facets of local government where some people held essentially unchecked power. And so I think when you get to a town this small, when you get to a town that is, I mean, to be frank, you know, they don't have internet right now. They don't. There doesn't seem to be a way to reach the outside world right now. Maybe part of that is like design of like the world, but I don't think it's necessarily out of the question to. It's definitely hammed up a bit, but I think in reality you absolutely could have this place, right, where Carol wields essentially dictatorial power, not necessarily by virtue of charisma, but because, you know, all of these people, like, there's maybe like 50 people in Homeworld, or in Hometown rather, tops, and, you know, everybody knows everybody, and it's just like, not only, and Carol is just sort of just this force that just is, right? There isn't really anybody in Hometown that has any desire or capacity to challenge the legend that she's built for herself. And so I think it's less to do with the political power that she could wield theoretically, and more just this sense of, like, the longer you stay in power and the longer you stay a function of leadership and a function of society, the more soft power you have, and the more you can turn that soft power into hard power. I think you could see that happened a lot in Arkansas, and that also happened quite a bit in Louisiana with whatever the family was that controlled Louisiana politics for like decades. The name is escaping me.
There's
right
been a couple.
now,
I mean, there were the Longs and then the Landrews.
The Longs are who I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Very dynastic politics there.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you and even at a national level, you have political dynasties like the Bush dynasty, and the Roosevelt dynasty, where literally a father and a son were presidents of the country, arguably at its peak of global power. So all of that is to say, she could absolutely wield complete and total power, both in you know, the minds of people, but also in the sense of, like, because what are you going to do? Challenge her?
Yeah.
Great. Who are you going to challenge her with? You got 50 people in this town, and most people don't want to challenge it. Like,
yeah,
that's what it comes down to.
And small towns like this often become hotbeds of these kind of patronage networks, or you know, total dominance, cults of personality. There's a great podcast that I'm a regular listen to called No Gods, No Mayors, which is every episode is a profile of a different weird mayor from around the world. And if you're interested in this sort of thing, I can really recommend it, because you can really learn about how these small towns can often become sort of hotbeds of these almost like dictatorial powers that wouldn't fly at higher levels of government, right? Wouldn't quite make it. And that reminds me, and that moves to our next question from Harriet, Green Room supporter Harriet, thank you, is that what does the mayorship of someone like Carol say about the character and political leanings of hometown? Does it read as suburban, exurban, or rural to you? And is it weird for a town as small as hometown to even have a mayor? It's a town with a one-room police station and like 80 people. Would a town of 80 people more often have a mayor, or do something more like direct democracy? And I will say it is interesting that hometown appears to have a strong mayor system, because most small towns in New England run on something more like a town meeting system, right? Where the citizens of the town show up to meetings and rule directly in that, old New England sense. But it's not unheard of. I did a little bit of looking into municipal power structures in various New England states, and there are definitely cities that have strong mayor systems in New England. Depending on the state, the structure is a little bit different, and it's common. Typically, it's common for smaller cities to elect a mayor from the city council. But it's a directly elected mayor is not unheard of, especially this is often the case in very small towns when the town used to have a much larger population but no longer does anymore. And so you get these sort of legacy towns that have, government structured like an older system for a larger population that still sort of run in that old way. And, hometown has these big old apartment buildings. It's not inconceivable to think that at one point it may have had a higher population that would have justified that kind of political system.
And I'd agree with that. I think that that's absolutely the case, that it could have been larger. I think you could, to me, right, I would say it reads to me mostly as rural. And the reason it reads to me as rural has to do with, like, even exurban places have a decent population, and exurban places are often growing. But there is definitely the sense that hometown is dying. Yeah. I think there is, or at least it's stagnating, and I think that's heavily implied by. I think the map is restrictive on purpose in that regard. Or not only is it small, even at its full size, but you're also, more often than not, when you're in hometown, you don't ever have access to all of hometown. Like, it's blocked off in some way, and I think that's intentional. I mean, I'm just looking at the map of hometown right now, and not counting the insides of buildings, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9 rooms in hometown. That's it. There's 9 rooms, and just by eyeballing it, there's maybe like 20 buildings. There's not a lot there. And so I think that, and it has to do with, like, the fact that there's a festival at all here seems indicative to me that it used to be larger. And I also think that there's this implication that, like, especially when Asriel and Des were Chris's age, it was a bit larger. And I think there's just, like I said, there's just this idea that everything is dying out. And when you have that level of apathy, it's a lot easier for everybody for entrenched power structures to stay in power, right? So I don't necessarily think that I don't really know that you can even call hometown conservative so much as you can and disaffected and uninterested. Like, people are just kind of living their lives, and I don't really know that I feel like there's any sense of community, because there really isn't a community, in the sense, like, even during the festival, you only see a couple of people.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I mean, for God's sake, Sans is running 3 things on his own, and I don't think that's, I mean, it's very funny gag, but also, like, why is he running 3 things? It's a small town. And so I think, as far as let's come back to the question, which is like how realistic is it that they can not how realistic is it that they can hold that much power? Please, let's come back to the actual question again. Could you reread that for me?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the question was, it was a multi-part question, but I'd say, is it weird for a town as small as hometown to even have a mayor? It's a town with a one-room police station and like 80 people, and it's like, yes, it is, but it's not unheard of.
Yes, it is, and I think, but like to your point, right? And that ties into what I'm saying about hometown being this dying thing, is that perhaps it made more sense in the past when it was a larger, more vibrant town with more people in it, but everybody leaves it at the first opportunity, as evidenced by like Asriel going to college and never coming back. Like him coming back is an event; it's a big deal. So I think that it makes all the more sense that hometown has a mayor as something that is dying, because there's no organic desire to change the political structure of hometown, because there's no organic desire to change hometown generally.
Yeah, exactly. And you see the ones who stayed around from the from Asriel and Dessa's graduating class are in these dead-end jobs, right? They're working at Icy's Pizza, right? It's not a particularly fulfilling place full of opportunity for those who are growing up, or they've become cops, right? And that brings us to another question. Do you think the recurring governing and carceral elements of Dark Worlds, i.e. a singular ruler in a castle with prisons where the party is jailed, is reflective of some element of hometown's politics, whether real or perceived? And I do want to, point back to the chapter 1 dialogue with Alphys on this, where she says, because of the mayor, there isn't any crime. Makes me wonder if she even needs the police or if they're just getting in her way. And it's true. It seems like, she's a very tough on crime type of like that's her pitch to the electorate, right?
Yeah, but I'd also say that, like, at least for me, right, I don't know if I would say the Dark Worlds having restrictions and, like, them getting in prison and all of that is representative of anything carceral, if only because, like, I just don't see that. To me, it's more representative of, in general, the stifling and backwards and apathetic nature of hometown generally.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know that I would chalk it up to anything carceral, especially because the Dark Worlds are supposed to be means of escape. In my mind, it's more the real world getting in when you have stuff like that happening.
Yeah.
That's just my take on it. And as far as like the police existing, that to me is like, oh, well, you gotta have the police, right? You gotta have it's like a post office, right? You gotta have a post office. Yes, you gotta have a library. Like that's how I read that. I didn't look into that thoroughly.
Yeah, that's
like
fair.
I just didn't see.
It's something
I didn't
you
see
could
that.
think. It's something you could think for sure.
Yeah, you absolutely could. It's not how I chose to see it though.
Let's see. Let's grab another question here. Do you think hometown ever had a DSA? And here's the answer. I bet it did, but like in the 80s Glup Shido era of DSA. You know what I'm talking about? When it was like the Michael Harrington, there's a ton of old elected officials across New England and New York from like that era, right? Where DSA was very defanged and just part of that American New Left movement.
Yeah, I mean honestly, I would have to say that I agree, and I am a member of DSA. I'm very young though. I'm 26, so I wasn't even alive in the 80s, much less alive enough to be involved in politics. So my reaction is that if a DSA existed, it existed one in the olden days with people like perhaps maybe I don't know, fuck. Gerson and Asgore and Rudy probably got together for beers and decided that they were gonna do socialism or some nonsense. But then also I could totally see a world in where disaffected youth is escaping the town to be involved with politics or be involved with the real world in more meaningful ways elsewhere. So do I think that Asriel went to college elsewhere because he wanted to be more involved with politics? No, I think he went to college college elsewhere because there's no college in hometown. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like, college is where people tend to find themselves, or it's where they do some of their growing into adulthood. So, like, I think that's another thing that's like, if it had a DSA chapter, it certainly does not now, because there's just not. There has to be any semblance of growing or growth or whatever ever for there to be a DSA chapter. Perfect example is the two places I've lived in Florida. So I used to live in Jacksonville, which
Lovely
is what?
Lovely town, I said. I grew up in Gainesville, and I was always fond of Jacksonville.
Yeah, I was in downtown Jacksonville for 4-ish years. And, you know, we just elected a Democratic mayor. It's a large city. There's 1 million people there. It's physically large, one of the largest in the country. And so there's a lot of, and it's growing, right? That entire metro area is growing. And so there's a lot of space to be involved in local politics there. And you compare that to somewhere like where I live now. I live in a conservative beach town about an hour south of Jacksonville, and it's run primarily by NIMBYs, and so there is no movement there. And so I think you kind of have like that same thing in hometown, right, where it's just like there's nothing. Hometown's dying, and it's probably, even in any good ending of the game, hometown is going to continue to die. Because it's just there's
That's like the inescapable trend of basically every American small town that doesn't have a college, right? I mean, you mentioned, the one opportunity, the one character who seems to find opportunity has to leave hometown to do it, right? The great hope that everybody loved, Azrael, has gone off to college, and it's like those are the kind of small towns that are still making it in America. And I think that's very poignant, that like absolutely, like hometown is representative of a certain kind of dying out place. And that's part of the appeal of the Dark World. That's part of the appeal, maybe even of the roaring to the conspirators, right? To Chris and the Knight, right? That there's no future in a place like this. So why not try for some sort of strange some sort of strange supernatural apocalypse?
Absolutely.
Let's see. We got some great questions, and we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but I want to say I appreciate all of them. This one, I don't even really have a joke here. Jude asked, did Pizzagate happen at Icy's in Deltarune's world? Yes, sure, why not?
Oh God, brother. I mean, like, who even would be involved in that? Who even?
We don't know. I did want to get to this, even though it's my own question. It's my own thing I wanted to get to. But I wrote in the question thread, hey, Kate, longtime listener, first-time questioner, who do you think everyone in hometown would have voted for in the 2020 presidential primary? I'll hang up and listen,
brother.
Thanks. And so so it was originally, before the whole thing with Platner, I was originally wanted to talk about who in hometown would have voted for Platner in the primary and who would have voted for Mills. But
and then stuff happened.
And I think the 2020 primary is going to be the most fun to do this with. So I want to start with Toriel. My take on Toriel is she was an anti-Trump Republican, right? She was a big Mitt Romney head, right? She probably voted for John Kasich in 2016, and those people basically all left the party. So she was a clear Biden number one. Maybe Pete Buttigieg, maybe Biden in 2020.
Yeah, the only thing that I struggle with is that she's too accepting of someone who is non-binary and their one girlfriend, and to register to me as even an ancestral Republican, right? That's what I struggle with, because like Chris is an NBB and she loves Chris, yes, and I have a really hard time. I mean, fundamentally, I have a really hard time with even that like group of like the sensible conservatives. Like, I could see a world where that happens maybe, like, but also like if we're thinking about it, like I could see it, but I also think it's far more likely that she just turns into like she turns into like an Evelyn normie dem suburban wine mom type thing.
It's true, because she's conservative by hometown standards, right? Like, she's explicitly like more religious, more focused on like sin than than the church actually is, right? And Asriel got in trouble for like kissing a girl growing up, but that doesn't really make her conservative by an overall American standard.
Yeah, and that's what I'm like. That's what I'm like trying to process, and I very much struggle. Like, I think she's an overprotective parent, which is rich coming from her, considering the ending of chapter 4. But I have a hard time seeing her being conservative now. Maybe in the past, but yeah. I think I just
The Kattenheimers voted for Bernie. Easy. That's easy.
I gotta do some looking at who. Let me take a quick.
That's
look
like
here.
Dad Cat and Mom Cat, and probably let's say that Catty the Elder was a voting age. I think they probably voted for Bernie.
Yeah, although she's also an occultist, so like.
Oh, that's Catty the Younger is the occultist. She would never vote.
That's actually very true. Yeah, that's really true. Let me think here. So I see. This is gonna reveal me as not part of the fandom, because Catty with an I and Catty with a Y I did not recognize until right now that they were separate characters.
Why do they have the same name?
But yeah, I mean, I could see it. I could see it. Who else? Who's next?
Let's go with Undine. Undine's a cop. She voted for Kamala.
Yeah, there's not much room for argument there. If we're talking 2020 primary though, like because Kamala ran in 2020. Although Kamala ran to the left hard in 2020, so I can honestly see a version of her that voted for Biden because Kamala ran too far to the left.
That's true, yeah.
Undine, despite being a lesbian, is also somehow conservative.
Yeah, she turns into like a fascist dictator in some of the Undertale endings.
Yeah, no, she's voting. She's voting. She considers herself voting Republican because it's sensible. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah. Alphys. Now, I have a pitch for Alphys, but I want to hear yours first.
Alphys, she is writing in some Glupshido.
Here's what I think. She did vote for Glupshido, but I think it was Andrew Yang. I think she was in the Yang gang.
No, because Alphys is also lesbian, so that doesn't work.
It's not Yang wasn't homophobic or anything. But
Yang wasn't homophobic, but he was also too rich. And
That's
Alphys
fair.
He's also too rich. Alphys would never be caught dead at voting for a multimillionaire. Alphys probably she probably wrote in like fucking she wrote in Gerson Boom or something after he had died.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Who's next? Let's see. Alvin. This is an interesting one. Who was appealing to like religious, who was like appealing to like, the woke religious vote in the 2020 primary?
Alvin. Pre-chapter 4 Alvin is voting for Ted Cruz.
No! Alvin's nice. Alvin's not a conservative. He's like a Lutheran. He's like a Lutheran pastor.
No, he's nice, but that doesn't mean he's not a conservative. Like he is an ancestral conservative, especially because his father is Bernie. Like Gerson is Bernie. Gerson just is Bernie.
Oh, you think it was like a youthful rebellion thing? But he's not. He wasn't able to rebel. He lived too much in Gerson's shadow.
That's not that, but that's precisely my point. Is that like. He lives in that, and that internalizes as like voting for like it's just kind of this like learned helplessness basically. And then post chapter 4, I think he goes reading the note that his father left for him. He's going full woke. He transformed into a vampire and went full woke.
Okay, I'm gonna skip over the total glup shitto lightners here. I'm already doing that. I'm like, I don't need to know who any of these people are voting for. Now Rudy and Carol. This is very interesting. I want to hear your pick on Rudy. I know who Carol voted for, and I think I have a very strong idea. I think Carol voted for Bloomberg.
In the 2020 primary, Rudy, who would Rudy vote for? Well, I think what Rudy did is he was in the hospital bed and had to have someone vote on, and had to have Carol vote on his behalf, so Carol got to vote twice.
Yeah, probably true. She probably just votes for him in every election. She just fills out his ballot.
Actually, I mean, not necessarily. Like, that's the joke part, but in reality, there's no love lost in that marriage. I think his ancestral, if we follow the line of logic that he was part of that ancestral DSA chapter that Asgore and Gerson were part of, then he's voting for Bernie in 2020.
Yeah, I think this is a classic, like, Bernie, and obviously Carol's the Democrat. She got elected the mayor of a small New England town. Like, she's got a D by her name, even though she's this emblem of, like, conservatism.
No, yeah, like, she is a Democrat, but she is, like, the most blue dog Democrat that there is, or, like, definitionally a Democrat in name only. Like, just because, like, anybody that ran as a Republican in hometown just wasn't going to win. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, she's very excited to vote for Seth Moulton against Ed Markey in this upcoming primary.
But, like, I'm not sure I buy that she would vote for Bloomberg, if only because I don't buy. I think she's just fucking voting for Trump. Like, I just do.
I don't know. I think Trump's a little too, she's very stead, right? She's very, like, I feel like the optics matter to her, and I think Trump's a little too outlandish, maybe, for her, right?
Why would she care about the optics? She has an iron grip over the city, and voting is done in secret.
That's fair. All right, that's fair. I could see that. I could see either Bloomberg or Trump for Carol.
Or perhaps the other argument, if we're talking about the 2020 primary, you could also make an argument for Ted Cruz, because she would look at Ted Cruz and see somebody who is actually genuinely ideologically committed to conservatism and is also not a complete moron. Yeah. So actually, the more I think about it, I think she votes for Ted Cruz, who's in the primary, and begrudgingly votes for Donald Trump in the general.
Maybe she voted for, like, Doug Burgum or one of the other, like, Republican glup shittos.
No, because Doug Burgum's not conservative enough.
That's fair. All right, who's the other?
But no, I have a really hard time seeing she voted for a conservatem, because I just don't think she cares about optics. I don't think she cares about optics at all.
Let's see. We already said Asgore is he was part of that Bernie bro. He was part of that Bernie bro dad caucus in hometown.
Yeah, although I wonder if there's something to be said about, like, the way things played out. Like, he like, kind of got, like, this is really mean to him, but, like, got cucked into conservatism.
He's become, like, a family court guy. He seems so accepting of Chris, and he's so, there's that brief moment where he's like, he sees Ralsei, and he's like, I hope that they know that they don't have to hide themselves or whatever. He seems like a nice guy. I just accidentally unfriended you on Discord. I didn't mean to do that. I just clicked unfriend.
Oh, you're all good. You're all good. But no, I could see, what I could see? I could see a situation where he's just as committed to the DSA-ness as Gerson and Rudy are, and then in the wake of the divorce and in the wake of associating with Carol, he has a lapse in judgment. Man, Hillary Clinton is just so repulsive. He votes for Trump, and then the entirety of Trump 1 happens, and then he just is destroyed, and it hurts him even worse than it hurts him as much as the divorce. Like, I think that's what makes the most sense to me, is that he's one of those people who he he couldn't stomach voting for Clinton, because he was so anti-establishment, and like that's the part of the DSA that never left. But then like many people who voted for Trump because they were just like so repulsed by Clinton, he's like, oh holy shit, this person
This was a
this guy's
mistake.
fuck. Yeah, and like that's part of what's been causing his psychosis ever since the divorce. It's just the knowledge that he was a Trump one voter and that he regrets that.
Yeah, and my final question, and I have no idea how to answer this one. How does Sans vote?
Sans doesn't vote.
Yeah, I was gonna say that seems right to me that Sans doesn't vote.
Sans doesn't vote, or like he fucking takes the bottle of ketchup out of his goddamn beanie, and he uses it to fill in he uses it to write in papyrus or some shit because he thinks it'd be funny.
Yeah.
Funny. I genuinely like, I don't know, man. Like I think if we're like that's my joke answer, but the more and more I think about it, like Sans as a character, he's always been way smarter, way more aware than everyone else lets on, but he's also new to town. I think he probably is the kind of person who doesn't participate in voting, but he believes in electoralism. He's still an electoral politics guy, but he does not vote. He is doing everything behind the scenes. He's just doing everything behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, like, I don't know, maybe he lets like Papyrus vote for him or something.
I think you've definitely hit on something, which is that Sans knows way more than he's letting on. I think that's extremely obvious. And
yes, I'm very. I also, it's also why like I'm not so clear here on this idea that like, oh, the image from chapter 5 was the don't forget. I think that's a fake out, as cool as that was, because I can't get my mind off of the thing from chapter 1 where you see him for the first time and you freak out because you're like, oh holy shit, it's Sans, this is so cool. And then one of the things you can say to him is nice to see you again, and he says that's really funny because we've never met before, and he says that while winking. I refuse. Yeah. It's part of the reason why I refuse to believe. Like everybody says, oh, this is the Sans that goes from Deltarune to Undertale, or from Undertale to Deltarune. I think something is going on there, but I think he's aware of something. He's 100% aware of something because it also would explain why Papyrus is not seen anywhere. Yeah.
All right, I think. Okay, we have time for one more listener question. I'm going to pick a stupid one. What does Milk Looker think about the raw milk bullshit?
Milk Looker. Let me look at Milk Looker.
I mean, Milk Looker is one of the... We have a fixation on Milk Looker on this show. Milk Looker, they're one of the minor NPCs that are in the grocery store looking at milk and always considering... what the best expiration?
Okay.
I think here's my thing.
I'm taking a look. So what do they think about the raw milk?
The raw milk bullshit. Here's my thing.
Judge of.
If they care so much about when the expiration date of the milk, they're trying to get the best expiration date. I think they care about food safety too much to be fucking around with raw milk.
I think that they also like it so much because they want to drink it, and they're smart enough to know that like they're absurd enough to know that like they were like, oh yeah, of course I can't drink raw milk, that's bad for me. And so they'd be like what, why do I care? Like they see the raw milk, like they'd obsess over it, and they're like they'd be like, look at all of they'd be upset that the raw milk is going in and it's encroaching upon the real true milk, the milk that they can actually drink.
Yeah. All right, and I think that's our show. I'm sorry if you sent in a question and I couldn't get to it, but I really appreciated this sort of slightly serious, slightly shitposty look at Hometown and the light world in general. And thanks so much for coming on, Sam. I really appreciate it. Do you have anything you want to pitch, and where can folks find your stuff?
I don't really have stuff, so to speak, so I appreciate you asking, but like I intentionally keep my internet profile pretty low. If you at all think that what I said is interesting and you want to talk with me, come hang out with me. Subscribe to Ettingermentum and go hang out with me in that Discord. I host watch parties on election nights in there, and other than that, get involved in politics. It matters, even at the local level. Go do something. So rather than pitch any of my stuff, go find a campaign you're interested in, whether it's local, state level, in-state, out-of-state. Go get involved. Go do something with your time.
Absolutely. And if you're in the Seattle area and you want any heads up on where the most important stuff to get involved in is, feel free to ping me on the Discord for the show, and I'll let you know. All right.
Yeah. But
well,
thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Bye.
Absolutely. Bye.
Thanks for listening, everybody. That was a fun one to record. We'll be back to normal Deltarune talk next week. Thanks for subscribing at groupashrike.net. For just $5 a month, you can get access to our bonus Green Room podcast with 8 episodes and counting. We've got episodes on movies, on 2000s webcomics, on growing up queer in the South, and more. Thanks so much for your subscriptions. You can subscribe directly in your RSS player on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or on YouTube. And you can join the Discord for discussions about Deltarune. The Discord's really popping off these days, so it's a fun place to be to talk about the podcast and talk about Deltarune in general. Oh, there's a scrub jay. There's a California scrub jay on my balcony right now. Oh, he's grabbing a peanut. He just grabbed a peanut and flew away. Let's go. Shoutouts to the Scrub Jay. See you next week. Check out Highwell at the Bandcamp link in the description.
Shrike Amalgamated General Productions GmbH